In the rural regions of Great Britain, customs and superstitions live on for millennia. History and legends are embedded in the soil and cling to the stones like moss to bark. The countryside of the British Isles has long been the stage for tales of magic, myth and mystery. And among all the characters that have played their parts in both our history and storybooks, some have maintained a starring role across the centuries. They were known by many names: sorcerer, seer, spellcaster, shapeshifter, and witch. This is a story of transformation, superstition, and regeneration. May the winds lie hushed and still, and raise no more without I will. Those who live by the hedges and on the edges have often been treated with suspicion. But in the days before formal medicine and scientific advancement, they were relied on for their knowledge of the old ways, of the natural world and the seasonal cycles, of healing herbs, and the mixing of potions. When the child cried out from fever, or when the cow took sick, the cunning folk and wise ones were sought. The countryside dances to the rhythms of agriculture and the seasons. So it's no surprise that many customs and rituals were enacted around the planting and harvesting seasons of May Day and Samhain, or Halloween as it's known today. At these times, the people believed that the veil between the worlds was at its thinnest, and that those who may choose to commune with the spirits of the other world were in their element, joined by their trusted familiars. The cat, sleek and cunning, prowling the dark lanes. The toad, dweller of dark and dank places, with its poisonous venom. Some believed its very bones were magical and sought out the elusive toadstone. I shall go into a hare with sorrow and sigh and mickle care. And there are many tales in folklore of the witch who transforms into a hare to steal the milk from the cows. Some tell of the farmer that chases the hare across the fields with his hounds, and occasionally the dog would catch the hare by the leg, but she would escape. But the next day, the suspected old woman will be seen hobbling on an injured leg. And those classic symbols of darkness, the black crows and ravens, were other typical allies for the witch. Wise spy and scavenger, messenger between the worlds. And those symbols of the night, the owls, held fear for many, and still do in some parts. Gliding silently, the wide-eyed watcher. Even insects and moths had their uses, for their ability to enter houses through the cracks and keyholes, to listen or bring bad fortune to the household. They often lived on the outskirts of the village in simple dwellings. The tools associated with them were considered vital to their magical practices. The three-legged cauldron for bubbling potions, the besom broom which enabled them to fly to their coven meetings. Yet these objects were commonplace to most households during that period, and therefore were no real evidence of witchcraft. The use of charms to ward off evil and black magic were common practice amongst country folk, with cursing stones being discovered from the Roman era. Puppet dolls, sometimes bound with a written curse. I act this spell upon you from my whole heart, wishing you to never rest, nor eat, nor sleep the resting part of your life. I hope your flesh will waste away, and I hope you will never spend another penny I ought to have. Another form of protection, often found within the walls and the attics of old houses, was the witch bottle, to guard against black magic. But where the belief in witchcraft had been considered mere pagan superstition, times were changing. No more the alluring and powerful goddess and sorceress. The view of the witch was to be transformed into an evil and ugly thing. With the coming of the witch hunters, guided by the writings and beliefs of Heinrich Kramer in the 15th century, and his book, the Malleus Maleficarum, Hammer of the Witches, the Dominican monk and German inquisitor who believed that all who practiced magic were in league with the devil and his demons, and that they should be hunted to extinction. The face of the witch became twisted and fearsome, and we begin to see the first images of the witch in her pointy hat upon her broom that we recognise today, with hooked nose and flowing cape. But it's very unlikely that she actually wore a pointed hat such as this. A coned hat was usually used for derogatory purposes, such as in the dunce's hat. A more popular design of the time was the flat-topped hat with wide brim, such as the witchfinder himself is wearing in this image. And just as the invention of printing had assisted Kramer to spread his message, the climate of the time, both natural and political, fueled superstitions. Europe was in the grip of the Little Ice Age. Crops were failing, plague and pestilence were rife, and so the people looked for someone to blame. And who else would it be but the witch and all those who danced with the devil? The accusations began to fly. It began in Europe with the first witchcraft trial in Switzerland. It would quickly spread, and soon land on the shores of the British Isles. And over the next 400 years, thousands upon thousands would be put to trial, tortured and executed. Thousands were convicted in Scotland, and many in England, including the infamous trials of Pendle. And so it continued until the Age of Enlightenment, or the so-called Age of Reason, in the mid-17th century, when the people began to suspect superstition and malicious gossip, and when the powerful ones had found alternative methods to suppress the peasants, with the introduction of the Highland Clearances and the Enclosures Act. The law locks up the man or woman who steals the goose from off the common, but leaves the greater villain loose who steals the common from the goose. Today, the magical arts are enjoying something of a renaissance in many parts of the world, free from the prejudices of past times. But there are still some places where witch hunts and persecution continue with a vengeance. And so what have we learnt from history? Words can become weapons, and paranoia can lead to the persecution of the innocent. So if you're carving your Halloween pumpkin, spare a thought for those who went before. Thank you for joining me. Good night.